everyone. This is a condensed video of something I posted back on Patreon over a year ago. It's the Mushroom Man. There he is. I'm using a 6x9 sheet of Arch, 140-pound cold press paper. And at this point, I'm just building up my composition to fit within my tape borders there. My board is laying flat, and I did all my sketching with a really hard lead pencil so I could erase it a little easier when I get around to erasing. So I'm starting by wetting the background and throwing in a nice orange glow, busily pushing my erasing shavings out of the way there. But just wetting the background, dropping in some orange, and then at the top of that sky when it's damp, I just dropped in some purple and let it dry. Now for the mushroom and just about everything else in this painting, I'm going wet in wet. So I'm painting, doing some negative painting around the nodules or carbuncles that are on that mushroom. Just dropping in some light raw sienna, some cadmium yellow, cadmium orange. Again, all wet in wet and just letting the paints do their thing on the paper. As I get closer to the bottom of the mushroom cap, I'll be dropping in some darker colors to indicate the underside of the mushroom and just let the paint enjoy itself on the paper. So once that is dried, I'm going in with a darker mix of the raw sienna and a bit of burnt sienna and painting the stump. And then on the right side, just lifting out a bit of color to indicate where the light is hitting it. Now I'm just building up layers. While it was damp, I just dropped in an even darker mix of the raw sienna. I think I threw some yellow ochre in there as well, and a few dabs of Payne's gray and some blue to indicate the shadow side of that stump. I'm going to do the same process for this little guy over here in the background. All wet in wet. Letting the colors mix on the paper. And whilst that is drying, I can do a bit of shrubbery over here on the left. So these are either really large mushrooms or that's a terribly small man over there. Oh, by the way, I should mention there is some nudity in this video, so be prepared to clutch your pearls. I have put a little modesty banner in there later on, but just thought I'd warn you, the Mushroom Man's hasn't got any pants on. So in the foreground, I got some rocks, and I'm indicating that with a mix of burnt sienna and some raw sienna, some purple, and some Payne's gray. I want to have the foreground a little bit darker, and again, the light. I'm kind of pretending the light is coming from the right. And for the grassy bits, rather than fill the whole area, I just laid in a dry wash of some greens to give some texture and then paint layers or glaze over that ground area later. Here I'm just painting the shadow side of that little mushroom in the background. And lifting out a little bit of light on the stump. Oh, I left you a note there that I'm using the Lamy Safari fountain pen with the medium nib. And that is a Diatramentis document ink I'm using. Now with my little mushroom done, I can get back to the big fella here and do some shadow work on the underside. Adding a bit of texture here and there with some dry brushing. And then on the cap, on the outside part, just putting some shadow with a very light wash of ultramarine and Payne's gray. And I'm putting that on all those knobs that are on the mushroom cap to show that they in fact are knobs and are sticking out. Got a nice blue going for the shadow of the mushroom, and I'm going to use that same blue in the foreground. Now with that all dry, I've come back to the painting and laying in some yellow on all those knobs. And my thinking is I'd paint them yellow, add in some orange, give them a bit of shadow, and then dab out the upper right side of all those knobs to give them a bit of a highlight. So there with a wet brush, I'm just lifting some of the paint out in the hopes of creating some highlights. I mentioned the light is coming from the right, so I'm throwing a bit of yellow on the edge of the mound. And with that all wet, I'm coming in with some sap green. And then in the immediate foreground, I'm just darkening it up with, I think that's some undersea green mixed with a bit of blue to really give it a nice shadow in the foreground. All wet and wet, just letting the colors fool around on the paper. And that's a rigger brush, and I'm just drawing in some grasses, giving it a little more texture. Now we get around to the mushroom man. The skin color, it's a yellow ochre with a bit of cadmium red and just a wee bit of blue to give it that skin tone. And I'm going to add a little more red in like that because the mushroom man's a little bit weathered being out there with no clothes on. So we'll just highlight some of the areas where the cold weather is getting to him. Doing a wet and wet for the face and trying to create a red nose on him. And I'm mopping out a bit of the color on his stomach. Give that a bit of a highlight. He's got lovely red hair. And in close to his scalp, I'm dropping in a bit of a darker color, so I've got a nice glow of his hair. So the light's hitting the hair, and it's a bit darker in around his forehead. Adding a few more shrubs. Walking stick's a nice combination of burnt sienna and Payne's gray. And then we'll get the rigger out and do some of these little twigs on the shrubs. Now after everything had dried, it got a bit pale, so I'm going back in with even more shadow color. And that's an ultramarine with some Payne's gray and a bit of purple. And with that, most of the painting is done, so now I can get out the fountain pen and start inking in the mushroom, the foreground, and at the very end, I'll get around to doing the mushroom man. Using some stippling there with the pen to create some texture, and at the very end there I just did a quick splatter to add even more texture to the grass in the foreground. Adding a bit more color to them. It's pretty windy out there. And that should about do it. So we'll get them signed. A few little odds and ends. Get the tape off it. There you have it. Mushroom Man. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, and by the way, if you like this sort of stuff, please feel free to like and subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. We'll see you later.